Hi, welcome to my gear review channel. My name is Evan and I'm a knife collector, which is a euphemism for addict. I have a lot of knives and I do a lot of reviews about them. This video is not targeted at the knife collector who went down every possible rabbit hole about steels, knives, blade shapes, handle shapes, types of knife, everything. That video is geared towards somebody who is simply shopping or already bought the knives that I'll be talking about as a Father's Day gift, because I think a lot of these knives will make their way to the dad's belts. So, here they are. Gerber Strongarm and Gerber Strongarm Camp. Well, I think they should have just called it Camp. I'll talk about it in a second. If you bought either one of these knives or their older iteration, you gave your dad a great present. And the rest of the video will be dedicated to a brief history of this knife, sheath configurations, various configurations you can carry this knife in. Because it's a first time Gerber is using MagnaCut on a fixed blade, I went ahead and did a Rockwell testing. That's what these three dots are all about on the blades. So I put it on my Rockwell testing machine and it will tell you exactly how hard they heat treated this steel. Why is it important? This steel is called CPM MagnaCut. MagnaCut is all about reaching this balance between corrosion resistance, edge retention, and toughness or resistance to strain. And this steel is amazing in the sense that it allows flexibility. So if you heat treat it a little bit lower, just over 60 to 62 HRC, you will get max corrosion resistance. If you heat treat it above 64 HRC, you will get max edge retention. But if you heat treat it somewhere between 62 and 64 HRC, you will get this balance point where you're getting a really decent performance in all three areas. That's why I did the test. The story of the Gerber Strongarm starts with lots of drama that happened in the early 80s. You see, back then the United States military was looking for a new bayonet for the soldiers and Marines to carry into combat. And that bayonet had a set of requirements to which companies had to competitively submit entries in order to win this contract. In the requirements, it was mentioned that it had to have a certain type of handle and a saw-like serrations on the spine of the knife, and some other utilitarian kind of features. Well, that spec leaked out to the public right when the movie Rambo was being filmed. And what leaked was misinterpreted by, the prop directors, and what came out of their interpretation of that spec ended up being a Rambo knife in the First Blood movie, the original first #1 Rambo knife here on the screen. After the movie came out, these type of survival knives became incredibly popular, and Gerber capitalized on this by releasing a knife called BMF, here it is, which stands for Big Multifunctional. Or was it Big MF? The knife was basically a more ergonomic knockoff of a Rambo knife, and then additionally they released a LMF, which was basically a scaled down version of this huge knife, which went from 8 inches to like 5-inch blade and a much smaller handle. Well, the trend continued and Gerber was happily chugging away making these knives, but it caught attention of some militaries in the foreign countries who also wanted to have a Rambo-style knife in their arsenals. So Gerber answered that call with a knife called LMF2, because the spec came in to the smaller size, 5 or 6-inch blade. And here it is. This is LMF2, which was designed to some military spec. I could not trace it to any military specs in the United States. I don't think it was ever officially issued to United States troops, but it was sold in the United States military shopping system called Post Exchanges. And it has some practical survival features like this humongous hammer everything stone breaker, I guess. Plenty of holes to attach it to sticks. Basically anything a Venezuelan or Pakistani general would imagine a military knife would have to have. I don't think U.S. military would order this type, but it became a popular knife. because anecdotally it could save your life in a helicopter crash. I think it's personally, I think it's a salesmanship story, but nevertheless, some military in some country carried this knife at some point. Now, the knife turned out to be expensive because it's very solidly constructed. So in the early 2000s, Gerber released this knife called the Prodigy. Basically, this was capitalizing on previous experiences with BMF and LMF and sort of putting it into a smaller 4.5-inch package with a much more utilitarian blade. And I don't recall if they came serrated or not, but here it is. That knife was a good seller. It even got picked up by Walmart. And to be honest with you, I still think it's a great utility knife. And so because these models were freely sold in the markets and also in the military post exchanges, a lot of them made it into early to mid-2000s combat fields. And based on the feedback that Gerber was getting from the combat troops that were carrying them as personal items in combat, they developed Gerber Strongarm. That knife came out in 2014. It came out with a straight-edged version and a serrated version. See this portion on the bottom? It's called serrated blade. Okay, so the reason to have a serrated blade, if you try to cut some canvas or webbing, this does a much faster job of it than the straight edge. But the drawback is you lose a lot of useful edge if you're just doing like food prep, wood cutting, or any other utility tasks. So a lot of military folks prefer to have a belt cutter because they ride into combat in the vehicles, and if something happens along the way where the buckle gets stuck, they are able to cut their belts with this serrated portion of the knife. So to recap, here's the knife that started it all, the M9 bayonet. And here's, I don't have BMF or LMF, starting with LMF2. This is a 5.25-inch blade. You got 4 7/8-inch blade, 4 7/8, 4 7/8. All these are made with a 420 knife steel. You know, a famous knife that has that steel is Buck 119. And here are the 2025 released MagnaCut blades. As you can see, the knife itself is identical or near identical in most respects to the 420 version of the same. The one difference I see, they changed the grind angle for the edge. And knife people call it secondary bevel, but everybody else calls it the edge. So the edge looks a little wider. The blade is of the same thickness. The reason it looks wider, they lowered the angle to make it slicier. But let me show you the difference in the edge first. Magnified 20 times. On the left is the original Strongarm, and on the right is the MagnaCut Strongarm. You can see that the grind angle is very different until maybe you get to the very tips of the knives, and then they look the same. And the reason the engineers could re-engineer it this way is because MagnaCut is so much tougher. In other words, it's able to resist bending moments or edge rolling much better than majority of other steels. So you can bring this edge to absolutely keenest possible condition, and also it keeps that edge for a very long time because it's pretty wear resistant. On top of all this, it's one of the 3 or 4 most corrosion resistant steels currently in the world, period. It does not rust. Well, anything rusts if you put it in a specialized rust chamber, but only laboratories do that. So if you dropped it in the salt water and left it sit for a day, all you would have to do is clean off the residue. And I have video about this steel performing as this on my channel. If you dig around, you can find it. And finally, this is the smallest of the knives. So instead of 4 7/8, they went down to 4 inches almost exactly. And as you can see, they completely reshaped the blade. So that brings me to my thought. The reason they called this knife Strongarm camp with the word Strongarm is to capitalize on the incredible popularity of the Strongarm. They share the sheath system. They're not interchangeable, but they have the same type of sheath system, and that's why they look so similar. These are locking features that keep your knife in the sheath. Other than that, the blade shape and the handle shape will lead this knife to perform very differently from this knife. So keep that in mind, that this is geared toward more all-around bushcraft survival and with some utility functions. This is geared for more utility functions with some survival capabilities. Sheaths are almost as critical to the fixed blade knife's performance as the blade, because they define how easily and safely a person can carry that knife on when they're out there on an adventure. This is the evolution of the sheath that Gerber went through. This is early 2000s understanding of how the sheath should be mounted to the MOLLE, load-bearing gear that soldiers are wearing in the field. And these straps are there to attach to that armored vest gear. As you can see, you can also carry it on the belt, and there are a couple different positions that you can choose from. They repeated pretty much the same approach in the Prodigy, and to remind you, this was done in the early 2000s when these models came out, with their current understanding of how military would carry these knives. So when the feedback came back from the wars that the United States military was involved in and other countries, they modified the sheath, the knife, the webbing system that comes with it, and they made it quite a bit lighter. All right, so let me go into the sheath function, because if your giftee or recipient of the gift is not familiar with this knife or this type of sheath, if they're not necessarily a military person or whatever, it comes with like a whole instruction booklet, size of the bed sheet. But let me get you into the basics. So the knife is retained in the sheath primarily by this retaining tab that engages this locking feature on the knife, and the sheath is fully ambidextrous. In other words, you can flip the knife over and it will lock any way you turn it. So you can carry it on the left, on the right, blade forward, blade backward, edge forward, edge back, any way you want. And this is the secondary feature that I recommend people use if they prodding through the bushes. But if you are in camp and working on food prep, you don't have to have it locked. The knife will ride on your belt just fine. And speaking of riding on your belt, there are a couple different options here. So right now it's assembled. As you can see, this webbing is connected to the back of the sheath here. And right now it's set up for high belt configuration, so it's going to ride on the hip in this configuration. And it's also available to be extended into the down leg configuration. And for the down leg, you can do what I did and just put it on the belt like this, or you can fully disconnect it here and flip it around and even adjust it for height here. So you can wear it as high as this. And then some people buy additional strap that goes around the leg, hence around the thigh, hence the down leg configuration. As you can see, it can hang down pretty low. Another feature of this sheath, this bracket here is designed to put the knife on a trouser belt in horizontal orientation. Here how it works. And some people like carrying it in this orientation and the small of their back. It's called scout carry. I personally don't do it because when you take the knife out, you are blind to as whether or not you're putting it back into the right spot, or you're about to stab yourself in the back. So some people carry it like that and love it. A lot of military guys carry it on the extension utility belt because it's actually Kevlar, so they're less worried about stabbing themselves. And finally, if you don't carry it on your belt at all, you can remove this bracket by squeezing these two tabs and pulling this, called a MOLLE attachment tab, and then you can mount it directly onto the MOLLE using the same tab, or you can just throw it in your pack without any attachments. You still have ways to lash it to gear because there are plenty of slots and holes here. So very, very versatile sheath. In fact, there's probably more engineering thought that went into the sheath than into the knife itself, or at least as much. And of course the camp, so my camp, for some reason they missed and didn't put a black matching one of these into the box, which was disappointing, but I have plenty of these knives, so I'm just using a green one. I don't know if it's olive drab or coyote tan. Greenish brown, right? And Camp MagnaCut comes in this same color as the regular Strongarm, but there's also a 420C version of this knife that comes in a gray handle configuration, like a battleship gray. And I'm not sure why, but this color is a lot more popular out there. So the prices are, for the regular camp, it's like $90. Is it 90? Which one I would choose? I don't know. I already told you this is geared more towards survival and utility. This is geared more toward utility and survival. You get to decide, but maybe my hardness test will help you make this choice. This is my Rockwell hardness benchtop tester, and I placed Gerber Strongarm there for scale. To deliver the best information I can, I do this in the beginning of each test. I show you that I have a independently certified calibration block. Here it is. It's serialized to the paperwork there. Block is certified by National Institute Standards and Tests certified independent assessor. This block is certified to be at 61.99 HRC, which translates into 62 HRC. And the procedure is I preloaded with a 50 kilogram load and set the zero. After the zero is set, I release the lever that applies additional 100 kilograms of load, and the diamond-tipped indenter then bites or pokes into the steel of the blade, or in this case the block, and when I release it, it gives me a final reading. In this case I'm reading 62.4. This is a little bit higher than it should read, but it is well within the tolerance for the tester. So I'll just subtract 0.4 HRC from consequent blade tests. Here's the blade. That's the same Strongarm I was just showing you in MagnaCut. So I'll subtract 0.4 in consequent tests just to keep it on the conservative side. Here we go. Each time I poke the blade, it leaves a permanent indentation on the blade. I normally try to do it somewhere where it's not visible, but this knife does not come apart. In other words, the handle is permanently attached to the blade. It's a full tang knife though. And because it's a production knife, the heat treat is uniform through the entire blade and tang. So now I'm going through setting up the poke, number one, for the Strongarm. And for some reason our parakeets are going wild in the background. I apologize for that. And then the descent of the weight takes 10 seconds. That's why there's a pause here. I will cut it out in the consequent tests. The first result is 62.5 HRC after minus 0.4 HRC correction. Setting up the second shot. Please don't forget to hit a like button if you're enjoying this content. It really helps my channel, and my channel is dedicated to delivering hype-free content about knives and other gear. This reading comes in at 62.4 HRC. The lab geeks call it a repeatable result, but please understand that I'm testing this one knife. Your knife may be slightly different from this one. And really, plus or minus 1 HRC doesn't make a huge difference in performance. And the third poke is at 62.6. Very solidly repeatable result. My final verdict is this blade is between 62 and 63 HRC. A few hours have elapsed since I tested the previous blade, so now I have to recheck the calibration of my hardness tester using the same block here. So here comes the Strongarm Camp blade. You probably noticed that the grind on it is a lot higher, the primary grind that leads from the edge to the spine, which means overall thickness or overall cross-sectional area is lower. Therefore, the basic Strongarm will be tougher than this one, no matter what, even if their Rockwell hardness is identical. Usually, a knife designer will balance this equation out by maybe heat treating it to a higher toughness, and sometimes at the expense of edge retention or corrosion resistance. But because this is MagnaCut, that difference in performance is much smaller per point of hardness that you gain or lose. And this time my calibration test comes at 62.2 HRC. I will continue with the same principle, subtracting 0.2 HRC from consequent results. While I'm setting the blade up, I would like to take an opportunity to thank my subscribers and ask you to subscribe if you are not one of them yet. I also would like to thank my channel members who are paying a small monthly fee to support my channel. I do not advertise, sell, provide affiliate links to knives. I do have some affiliate links to other useful gear in the video's description. Please check it out. And some folks choose to support me by purchasing super thanks. And you know, for some reason I feel like that is the most exciting and simultaneously humbling experience a YouTuber can actually get. I thank you no matter which way you choose to support my channel. And the first poke comes at 62 HRC on the dot after correction. The video skips to the second poke and I have 62.1. Let's look at the third result. We got 62.2 HRC, and my final verdict for the Strongarm Camp, this Strongarm Camp, is 61.5 to 62.5, which in my humble opinion is absolutely perfect for a thinner blade.